Hello everyone, welcome to the Eternal Patch Breakdown for patch 1.28. We have a new promo card in the wings, so there'll be something fun for the weekend, and I'm super excited to see it. It is a Blood Scent Avasaur, 3/3 flying dino for 3. Those are Twilight Raptor stats, if I've ever seen any. It's got a pretty decent stat line, and its fate ability is your dinos get +1 strength. So whenever you draw this card, all of your dinosaurs that are in play will get +1 strength, which makes it so that you can do some really cool, like, sort of second sight shenanigans. I'm very much looking forward to playing this card in particular with the Teriax Hatchlings, which are the 2/1 dinosaur flyers that are just really amenable to second sights. So if we do that in second sights and Blood Scent Avasaurs, then we can get like a pile of really interesting flyers. We can throw Twilight Raptors in there. We can do just cool flying dinos deck in aggro. And then, like, you can also use this to just get minor buffs out of second sight and play around with second sight and twinning ritual, both of which are cards that dinosaurs really like. And on top of it all, it's a really efficient flyer. Like, a 3/3 flyer for 3 is nothing to joke about. So I think this card's got a lot of strength to it, and it's a pretty strong addition to dinos in particular. It's in those Feln colors, blue and purple, which is not bad at all. Like Feln is going to need a little bit more to work with, I think, in upcoming patches. We're going to be looking at probably some other archetypes of Feln in addition to Feln Control, especially since there's been some mild nerfs along the board. But a lot of the patch notes and patch changes today are cleanup and sort of like setting up for what I would guess to be full release, or just like basically, you know, for extra design space and making sure that like things don't break in ways that people don't like it. In particular, they have changed Steward of the Past, which is one of the most impressive. Like that card has been a staple since the very start of Eternal. So it has always been a card that has had like a mildly confusing amount of interaction to it, but they have changed it so that it does something a little bit less powerful, and that is basically going to be part of the focus of what we talk about when we talk about the patch notes. So yeah. But we have Blood Scent Avasaur, and already, like, that's a pretty good start to the day. Let's talk about the notes themselves. I am going to go ahead and go over all of the different card changes, and we're going to talk about each card in turn. I'm going to pull them up in front so that we can show what's changed and what hasn't, and should be a delightful time. And I thought I had the patch notes in front of me, but no, I do not. That's a completely different thing. So we're a little bit scattered, but we should be able to get this through in just a second here. So patch-wise, what's changed? First things first, and the card that I mentioned already is Steward of the Past. We have this 3/5 deadly unit. Steward of the Past and Statuary Maiden have both had some mild tweaks made to them. Steward of the Past in particular has been nerfed. His summon ability is silence all enemy units in the enemy void, just as it always was, but he used to always silence units that were also in the void whenever they went to the void. So if an enemy unit had an Aegis on it and it died to Steward of the Past, then it would go to the void, but it wouldn't get silenced. But if an enemy unit didn't have an Aegis on it and it died while Steward of the Past was on the board to any effect, it would get silenced. And now what's going on is that doesn't happen anymore. Steward of the Past doesn't do that, and instead he simply silences all enemy units in the enemy void when he comes out. So this is sort of like a change to, like, basically remove some sort of weird interactions going on, specifically those interactions revolving around Aegises. Steward of the Past is still a powerful card. This card is still a very well statted shadow unit that happens to have deadly, which is really excellent, and happens to shut down grave strategies, which is really useful. He no longer shuts down revenge strategies particularly well. He does turn the destiny off of revenge cards, which is something that you do want to do because that's where a lot of the sort of late game power of revenge cards sets up, but he no longer just basically turns off revenge. And as a result, revenge decks are going to get a lot better in particular. He's going to be a little bit weaker against Scream, but not by much. Most of the time against Scream decks, you're playing Steward of the Past specifically to shut down a Scream card that you don't like. However, now you can't have Steward of the Past down and kill a Scream card and then feel safe that it's not going to actually, like, you know, come back. So you actually have to play the Steward of the Past for whatever it is that you want to shut down. It also makes Dawnwalker decks a little bit stronger, but Dawnwalker has been slightly nerfed to make up for that, because Dawnwalker is another one of those key cards that we tend to see, like, very heavily pushed in particular colors. Like, you want to have Dawnwalkers in heavy time decks, and that's not going to change, but Dawnwalker has changed a little bit to be reactive to this nerf. We do have some new puzzles added and some other stuff. We'll talk about that at the end of it, but it's pretty cool. Okay. So, talking about Steward of the Past, as they said, Statuary Maiden and Steward of the Past are among their most complicated cards and have led to a variety of complex rules interactions. I am now reading the copy, as well as inconsistencies in the game engine. The effects of these cards will now be easier to predict and have a more clearly defined set of cards that they affect. In addition to alleviating issues with future design space, these changes separate the effects of the two cards, giving them more distinct play from one another, and I do actually agree with that one. So, the other thing that we're going to be talking about here is Statuary Maiden, which is the card that does the exact opposite of Steward of the Past. It specifically silences units whenever they die while Statuary Maiden is on the field. Now, Statuary Maiden hasn't changed a lot. The main difference here is she specifically says one thing that was always true about her, which is that enemy units can't entomb or revenge. And whenever an enemy unit dies, as always, she transforms the unit into a +2/+2 cudgel. The one thing that changes here is that Aegises on units used to protect against Statuary Maiden from turning things into cudgels. That doesn't happen anymore. When the unit goes to the void, that interaction now happens specifically in relation to the Statuary Maiden and you. So if a Statuary Maiden sends a unit to the void and you have an Aegis on your face, she won't get a cudgel. But if you don't have an Aegis on your face, it doesn't matter if the unit has an Aegis or not, the Statuary Maiden will get the cudgel, and she'll transform whatever the unit is. So this is a mild nerf to Jotun Feast Caller, for example. But by and large, like, this should still make things work just fine. It will not allow Wanted Poster to work Clockwork Babbage. It does, in fact, shut off Entomb. Enemy units cannot Entomb, so Wanted Poster will not work with this card. And it should be fairly simple to suss this out unless you've been playing with Statuary Maiden for a really long time. This is all like sort of what I would call future-proofing, and it's also like basically designed to allow people who are being introduced to the game to have an easier idea of what these cards do. Statuary Maiden, Steward of the Past, and Withering Witch were all cards that people really don't understand the interactions to early on when they're playing the game, and like, you know, new player interaction is important, so these are changes that are gonna like hurt, but I'm really glad they're happening now before release, so that's something that kind of makes a lot of sense. So Statuary Maiden and Steward of the Past are now more distinct from each other, and Statuary Maiden is actually, I think, a little stronger as a result of this. Being, I think the face Aegis versus the unit Aegis option was actually like kind of important, and it is like gonna be less likely that your face has an Aegis than your unit has an Aegis, if that makes sense. But she does, like, both of these cards do actually silence Aegises, which is pretty cool, so face Aegises are going to be a lot weaker in general, but regardless, both of these cards are still very, very strong. I think Steward of the Past is now on the level with Statuary Maiden, where I would have previously rated it slightly higher due to its better stat line. But Statuary Maiden just has more stuff going on in terms of shutting down the void, so that's a card that you're really going to want to run, and you can actually run these two cards together because they now do different jobs, so that's pretty cool. All right. Oh, will Highwayman get his effect now? Okay, so Highwayman get the effect now with Maiden on board. Looks like he does, so good to know, good to know. All right. So yeah, Statuary Maiden and Steward of the Past have both been changed, and like this is just a simplicity of design stuff. It does mean a mild nerf to Steward of the Past, which means more shenanigans for the rest of us. I'm definitely going to be playing a ton of Crown Revenge in the upcoming weeks. I love that deck to pieces, and Steward of the Past is just the card that I just dislike the most. We're going to see if the change to Steward of the Past is going to allow enough degeneracy to make them kind of regret their changes, but my suspicion is that they tested it pretty thoroughly, because Steward of the Past has always existed to shut down specifically those strategies. So I think he's still going to be a good card and still allow that kind of stuff to happen. Shenanigans, however, should be on the rise, and that's going to be good for the meta in general. It should imply a mild shift. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of crazy decks coming out as a result of this. Specifically graveyard-focused decks, Revenge, Haunting Scream decks, Crown decks, anything that relies on that sort of permanence of cards is going to be lots and lots of fun, and that's going to be pretty exciting. Okay, so that's one of the changes, and the other change that has to happen here is if we are changing Steward of the Past, we also have to change Dawnwalker, and this one's pretty light. Dawnwalker now has an influence cost on its resurrection. So if you have 4 time influence, then whenever you play a unit with 5 or more, Dawnwalker plays from the void exhausted. Where previously the Dawnwalker would just play from the void exhausted, you had to have the 5 strength or more. Now you have 2 thresholds. You have to have the time and you have to have the 5 strength or more unit. Now that's a pretty significant boost. Like, it means that the Dawnwalker only comes out late, and in fact we can read the copy on that one too. With the change to Steward of the Past, we wanted to pull that back on Dawnwalker while also ensuring that it appears in dedicated time decks. This change keeps Dawnwalker's core functionality while reducing how frequently it gets replayed in the early turns of the game. And yeah, that's exactly what you want to say about it. Like, this means that the more time focused your deck is, the more likely Dawnwalker is to be in your deck, but otherwise you might be looking for other options. However, the card is still going to be very, very good in the late game. It's still going to be good against like big armory strats, and in general, big Praxis is going to be perfectly fine playing this card out. It's a little bit weaker. It's still basically doing the same job that it always did, which is just securing that late game, but it no longer has that super early aggression that it used to have, which has always been sort of a problem with it. Like, this is a card that tends to really come out strong very quickly, and it's not very Praxis-like. Praxis really likes to sort of just like continue to play units and just outvalue you in this like giant swarm. I think this is a good change. I like the change to it overall, and I don't think that it affects Dawnwalker enough to make people stop playing it. So, but certain decks might be looking to go other places, and in particular, it's not going to be as good in like really heavy color, like discard graveyard strategies. So like blue, purple, yellow, or like Urskavate, where you have like Dawnwalkers in the Urska deck. You can't do that anymore. You can't really splash Dawnwalker into those decks to get the power. You have to use Ephemeral Wisp or other cards like that instead. So yeah, this card should be reasonably about the same, but by and large, it will come back less, and that is going to be yet another nerf to Dawnwalker. So, good stuff. All right. Yeah. Next up, we have Elysian Trailblazer and Elysian Pathfinder have both changed. I can pull them both up, but it's pretty much the same either way. The main reason I think this nerf happened is because of Pathfinder. However, Trailblazer got the hit as well. Both of them now have double influence in their costs. So with double time influence on Elysian Pathfinder, you're going to be able to splash it a little bit worse. And they are, yeah, that is specifically why they're trying to do it, so that you don't splash them in multi-faction decks quite as much. This is in particular a nerf to Echo Mocto decks. So if you are trying to play like just infinite Moctos with Elysian Pathfinders, you have to work a little harder for it. You actually have to get the double time out. And that's going to be a little bit trickier now, which is perfectly fine. Like, it is a strategy that you want to reward, but it's also a strategy that you should work a little bit harder for. I do think that, like, with the amount of degeneracy that I want to try, the Pathfinder nerf is entirely appropriate, because most of my Pathfinder decks are like 4 to 5 colors at the least, and if you want to play like a competitive Echo Mocto deck, you're probably going to have to go from 4 back down to 3 different colors, and that's okay. You're still playing your Moctos, your schemes, your other stuff. You're just not running like Rise to the Challenge anymore. If you want to do that, you're going to have a little bit less reliability. You're still going to have a lot of fun, and you're still going to be able to do it. It's just, you know, now you're going to have a few more problems with the Pathfinders and the Trailblazers. I'm a little sad to see anything that nerfs Carpet Shuffle decks, but I haven't had a viable Carpet Shuffle deck in a very long time. We'll be looking at some more of that in the Dusk Road as we accumulate our legendaries and build our decks out, but regardless, I don't think this change affects Trailblazer very much at all. Trailblazer was always sort of a solid Elysian or Skycrag card. She hasn't shown up that much in like 4-color or 5-color decks, and I'm looking forward to playing with her some more, but I don't think this change affects her in the slightest. Okay, here's a big one. Withering Witch has changed, and this one, more than Steward of the Past or Statuary Maiden, was by far probably the most confusing card that they've set up. And yeah, okay, Withering Witch has been one of the more confusing cards from a rules perspective, says the patch notes, and has led to unintuitive interactions, to say the least, and play patterns. This change preserves the intended functionality while cleaning up rules confusion. Okay. So, Withering Witch changes in quite a few ways. The main thing here is that it says undamaged enemy units. Their health becomes 1. So, what this does in terms of nerf potential is it takes away a couple of Withering Witch's more interesting play patterns, shall we say. You can't really do a lot of cool things with, say, you can't like Vara's Favor into a Withering Witch on turn 7, you have to Withering Witch into Avara's favor. You cannot Witch Storm, or rather you cannot Storm Witch, which was the really confusing one. Previously you could throw a Lightning Storm, throw down Withering Witch, and then the damage from the Lightning Storm would trigger on Withering Witch's +1s or -1s, and you would just kill the entire board on your opponent's side, but still keep a Withering Witch, which was kind of a big deal. They've been trying to figure out this card and like make it a little bit more like useful for a while. Like one of the things that they have generally done was it was a 1/4 and they brought it down to a 1/1 just to sort of like give it like some trade potential. Now they're bringing it down a little bit more. It has a few less options available to it. One thing that is still true about it is that if you Vara a Black Sky Harbinger into a Withering Witch, all of your enemy's units will die. It doesn't matter which order it is, Harbinger to Witch or Witch to Harbinger. That is simultaneous effects, so it'll count the undamaged. Both units, all the units' health will become 1, and then all of the damage will trigger, and everything on the opponent's side will die. Overall, this doesn't hurt the Witch too much. It's probably going to be a 2 of, I think, in Feln, as opposed to a 4 of. I don't think it was often a 4 of in Feln, so it'll come down a little bit. People will play a little bit less of it, but I think that it's still going to have a place, so we'll see where it goes. All right. So, yeah, Withering Witch is a weird and difficult card, and I'm fine with seeing that down. Oh, hey, here's an exciting one. Another one that got... We did see a lot of buffs. I think we've talked about all the nerfs first. Shall we talk about... Are there any other nerfs that are kind of important? Oh, yeah, we have some draft nerfs, which are actually kind of important. The main one is Valkyrie Arcanist. This one is the biggest change to draft. Valkyrie Arcanist now costs 6 instead of 5. And this card was a terror, I can confirm. It was a really solid common card that happened to just carry Valkyries, and carry green for a really, really solid amount of time. A 5 cost 3/3 is already a reasonable card in draft. This card draws you a Gem Blade, which just happens to synergize with everything that Justice wants to do, but also means that you typically have like a lot of big flyers in the air or just way too much in stats. So it was a real problem card, and I think that bringing it up does open up a little bit more space for the other colors to breathe, and that's going to be kind of a big deal. We'll read the notes here. Justice-based draft decks, particularly those that tie up the ground and win in the air, were a little too dominant. These changes aim to slightly reduce how easy this is and hopefully open up a diversity of draft strategies. The Arcanist change is the big one. There are 2 others. One of them is Frontier Confessor, which has gotten a slight nerf and a slight buff. It is now a 4-cost unit, a 3/2. The stat line is much, much worse, and that means that it can no longer jam up the ground. However, it is a little faster, which makes it a little bit closer to like Valkyrie Enforcer levels of when I need to deal with a problem, I can just play Frontier Confessor. I think overall this card is a lot weaker, but the ability to play a little faster is kind of nice, and it's not too bad of a change. It changed from 5 health down to 2, 5 cost down to 4. That's not as stat efficient, but it's still a card that you're going to want to play to deal with your enemy's threats. So I think you'll still pick it up. I just don't think it's going to do as much good for you. Emerald Spear got changed, and this one mystifies me. I'm not sure. I guess it was doing something. This was a card that I didn't pick particularly heavily, but Valkyrie-based strategies were always good, so there's nothing wrong with this card going up or down in power. I think being at 7 and having 1 more attack may be pretty net neutral. The Relic Weapons really want to have more attack so they can deal with more threats. This card is going to be a lot harder to play, and that's not a big deal, but I also just never picked this card, or I was very reluctant to pick this card, and when I did pick it, I never felt particularly good about it. I think I'll feel a little better about picking this as like the end of my curve, just because it will allow me to kill a couple more units, but by and large this card is not offering as many stats for value as it used to, so might decrease the sufferability of this card, and I'd be very curious to see like why this was a particular nerf. This is one that I don't have an explanation for, but it doesn't really matter either way. Like I'm not particularly attached to this card. I think I'm a little more attached to it now. All right, so those are all of the nerfs, with the exception of one, sort of. And this one is actually another big one. We saw a lot of Eternal staples being hit, and today Black Sky Harbinger got hit with the buff bat. So this is a 4/5 now instead of a 3/5. As a 6-drop unit, oh, it's a dragon too now. Was it always a dragon? I feel like it was a vermin before. I could be wrong, but yeah, it's a dragon. All right. Maybe it must have been a dragon always. All right. Anyways, so yeah, so this card can now be vanquished and it can now be hit with Island's Choice, which makes it vulnerable to one more removal spell. And that is sort of the only nerf that has happened to it. It is just a little bit more vulnerable to Justice, and Feln was already kind of having problems with Armory, so that could actually end up being a problem. And it's more vulnerable to Island's Choice, which is bad for the Chalice matchup in particular, and maybe for the matchup against, like, Martial Ironthorn Ramp. There's not that many sets where people are running Island's Choice, but they're going to be more likely to run it now that Steward of the Past has been nerfed and Black Sky Harbinger is no longer a 3/5. So I'm a little skeptical that this is going to be a net buff for Harbinger, but against all of the other factions, this is actually quite good. This is better against Praxis, it's better against like any sort of like big Xenon stuff. It is just really, really good against all of the mid-rangey stuff because it gives Black Sky Harbinger a lot more play in the air and allows him to just deal more tempo damage. 1 point of damage is generally always going to be a buff. While I love the 3/5 stat line, I think that like overall this gives Black Sky Harbinger a lot more play in mid-range style decks, in control decks that want to be really, really fast and aggressive. It's just not quite as good in sort of the passive, like really wants to be evasive type of deck that Black Sky Harbinger would be, you know, pretty fine in. Overall, I don't think that this is a nerf to Black Sky Harbinger, but I do think that it is going to struggle against certain sets, and you're gonna feel it there. I do think that this card has always been terrifying, and it's probably not going to change in that respect. It is probably going to be more terrifying against specific decks, and in other decks, you're just going to be able to actually remove it, which will be nice. That'll be fun. We'll see if that's any good. All right, so that's all of the things that you might consider nerfs. Now, there are a pile of buffs. We have so many card changes to work for. Here's one of my favorites. Devastating Setback has gone down in cost. All right, so it now costs 3, and in addition to changing the cost, we also have each unit gets -2, -2 this turn, instead of each unit gets -2, -2 permanently. This is almost completely net buff for Devastating Setback. Previously, Devastating Setback's big deal was that while it was very, very good at sweeping the board, it kind of killed your own units a lot, or at least made your own units kind of suck. So, like, if you were playing it, you would be like, oh, I've got this, like, Shadowlands Tyrant down, I'm facing down a Stonescar deck, all I need to do is sweep the board, so I'll just Devastating Setback, and now I've got, like, a 4/2, which gets torched and dies and feels really sad. But at this point, Devastating Setback can be cast earlier against Stonescar decks, which is a pretty big deal. And it is also just much better at basically disabling armory decks, knocking the weapons out of Tavrod decks, doing all of the things that you really want out of the modular spell. Because the discard a spell or attachment card was very often the correct choice, but it was the expensive choice as a 4-cost sabotage. Now that it's cheaper, it's much better, and now that it is costing 3, it is basically just like a really, really good slot for a Lightning Storm type effect. We don't have that many 3-cost cards that sweep the whole board, and Devastating Setback really adds to the power, I think, of shadow decks that want to play control. So this is a net buff for Feln control in particular, but also just a ton of good like mid-range shadow decks. I think this card is going to see a ton of play, and I'm fairly into it. Oh, we did miss one nerf, huh? Archenport Instigator. Fair enough. That's actually yet one more staple that got hit. All right. I'm pretty happy with this change. This is a change where, like, I think I asked for it once, like 6 months ago, and I totally forgot about it because like Stonescar Burn went away for a while and it didn't come back for a while. Yeah, but yeah, Archenport Instigator is now a 2 influence card for 2 with basically just the same abilities as it always had. So like this is a card that just is the backbone of so many Stonescar decks. I'm very happy to see it given a little bit of decreased reliability. It's now in the same place as Dream Snatcher in terms of like whether or not you can play it, which is to say that this is a really, really light nerf. This is a very light tap, but it is a card that you're not always going to be able to play on turn 2, which means that every once in a while it's not going to give Stonescar like that perfect win rate that Stonescar decks really, really love to have. So I think this is like overall net good for the game. I'm very happy to see it, and I didn't know that I wanted it until I saw it, but I definitely want it. So yeah, like this card is still just totally fine. You're still going to want to play it in Stonescar. You're still going to want to play it in everything. It's just that now you can open up like a couple of other strategies. You can actually run some of of the other 2-drops that were strictly worse than Arch-Import Instigator. Like, Dream Snatcher was pretty good, but like it basically, yeah, it was fairly difficult to run it when you also had Argent-Port Instigator. You had to run Instigator alongside Dream Snatcher. You could never run Cabal Cutthroat ever, and now maybe you could think about it. I don't know if you're ever going to run Cabal Cutthroat ever, but it might be something that you do. Like, you can definitely look at some other interesting 2-drops in Fire and Shadow and in just, like, a lot of different options. But still a card that you're going to want to play a lot of. Not a big nerf overall. All right. Yeah, no, that one's just awesome. Okay, so back to the buffs. We've got Torgoth, Ice Cap Trader. I was reading the copy on these, but now I'm just like... now I'm just not feeling so generous. I just want to talk about it. Torgoth Ice Cap Trader has been changed to 10 or more cards in the Void from 15 or more. That's pretty good. Torgoth was a very playable card for a little while, but he kind of fell off a little bit. Primal just didn't quite have the power that it wanted, and you just never saw this activation. So 10 or more cards should make it a lot more common to actually get the activation. You can now do it without like really building into Torgoth, and that's fine because that means that Primal actually gets another like fairly well-statted unit that it can play pretty frequently and get some value out of. I've been playing Torgoth in like some blue decks with the new Jotun Feast color, and I've liked him a lot, but I've just never found him to be a big card. And now that he can actually be a big card sometimes, that'll be really cool. So we'll see if we can get a little bit more Torgoth action in the mix. I am always happy to see Primal cards buffed. We'll see how that goes. Next up, Alu Death Dreamer. This one's real interesting. Alu Death Dreamer's down to 5 from 6. She was a really poorly statted card before, so this buff is well deserved. She's a unusual legendary already, so curse decks are still going to be something that you're going to really want to figure out if you can work with. The Summon Nightfall ability is still something that I'm not so sure of, like playing this on 5 and then giving your opponents cards and then still not being able to play curses makes it feel like this card is still not going to see play, but now that she's a little bit stronger, her stat line's still kind of weak, but the curse ability is very, very strong. So if you can get her to stick for any amount of time, then you can certainly do pretty crazy things with her. In particular, Rhymescale Draconis, just saying, like, blow them out with Permafrost, play a billion Unseen. It'll be delightful. I don't know if this card is any more than silly at this point, but I could see an Alu Death Dreamer deck actually becoming real now that this card costs 5. Okay. Alright, probably my favorite one, Stonecutter Alchemist. I love this card. This might be my least favorite one, I don't know. It depends on how many times I end up playing Stonecutter Alchemist between how many times other people end up playing Stonecutter Alchemist. This card was already good. It is now 3 cost down from 4. It is a 2/2 summon, deal 2 damage to the enemy player, lifesteal revenge, same stats as always. This card is 8 points of burn with 8 points of lifesteal, or rather it's 4 points of burn with like 8 points of lifesteal. It is nonetheless like just a really, really good life gain card. The specific reasoning behind this was to reduce the cost to give players another more powerful tool against aggressive decks, while also adding a valuable dimension to certain gunslinger strategies. And indeed, I barely realized that Stonecutter Alchemist was a gunslinger until like a draft like yesterday. This is a cool card to do gunslinger things with because gunslingers care about weapons a lot. So you can have some really nasty lifesteal gunslingers with revenge on them. They can shoot people in the face for a lot. This is the change that I think has the most potential to do like broken weird things. Like we can certainly do better Echo Stonecutter Alchemist decks. I've always considered the Echo Mocto deck to be totally fine if you take the Moctos out, because Stonecutter Alchemist is the real star of that deck, and now that card's cheaper. So yeah, this one could be dangerous. We're certainly going to try everything we can do to break this. I'm bringing back the Crown Alchemist as soon as I get a chance. We're going to be playing around with this a bunch. It is a ridiculously fun card, and it's going to give like some cool, interesting Argent-Port strategies that aren't really revolving around like Tavrod's sort of just big stuff, big stuff, big stuff. So I'm excited to see what happens here, and I'm excited to see revenge decks coming into play. Omens never really got a chance to explore them because Steward was really, really kind of domineering, and the revenge effects just weren't that powerful. But we have a new buff to one, and revenge is a cool mechanic, and I'm cool to see this meta with Stonecutter Alchemists for a while. If it's totally broken, then it'll be totally broken, but I think it'll be pretty fun for a while. So this is the one I'm most worried about and the most excited about. All right, Hideout Pistol is next. These are all Dusk Road buffs. So Hideout Pistol got a +1 bonus. A+. That is real good for Gunslinger decks. This card was not really played in Gunslinger decks before, but now it just kills a lot more things, and it gives more stats, which is not as meaningful as just killing a lot more things. But yeah, it's good. You can stick this thing and on a there was somebody in the chat who was saying that you can stick this on the Oni that doubles up your weapons and kill 2 tap rods. No, it kills Sandstorm Titans now on a lot of 3/3s. It is a much better card, and it is going to be pretty ridiculous in draft, and probably an actual playable card in ranked. I'm excited to see this card get buffed. It's a fun card and a good design. Talons Survivalist came down for from 3 to 2. All right, so from 3 to 2, this is not too big a deal either way. I haven't played this card yet. I'm sure it's fine, and bringing it down from 3 to 2 means that you'll be able to play it in Gunslinger decks that are like hybrid colors, which kind of seems important. If you want to bond Gunslingers, then you're probably going to be playing Gunslingers in different colors. So this seems like a net positive change. I've never seen Talons Survivalist played. I don't know if we'll see him played more now, but I think this is the right change. So yeah, I have no opinions on this one. Battlefield Scavenger. Okay, this card was already pretty good, I think, but pay 4 instead of pay 5 to draw a Valkyrie from your void and give it Warcry. So 1 less on that ultimate means that this is maybe a more ranked viable card. It was always a decent draft card, and now it's going to be good in Valkyrie decks and give you some cool stuff in Arch-Import Valkyries in particular. Green was already doing some pretty sick stuff, so this would worry me if it weren't for the fact that we have already like moved that big Valkyrie up to 6. And that big common Valkyrie was the biggest problem with Valkyries, so I think Battlefield Scavenger should just be a more fun card now. So yeah, and maybe even playable in certain ranked decks. He's still just a Minotaur grunt with a cool ability that benefits Valkyrie, so I'm looking forward to seeing him played a little bit more. Inquisitor's Halberd. This one is yet more Valkyrie buffs, and yet more Valkyrie buffs in Argentport. I don't think anyone was super excited by this card when it was shown off. I think this was the first ally card that was shown off, and people were like, that's not enough stats. Now it's enough stats. It went from +2 armor up to +3, so now it's a 3/4 weapon, and yeah, it can actually kill stuff now. I think overall this makes it a much better weapon. Getting a 3/4 on 3 is something that you can't currently do, so having some Valkyrie and getting a Valkyrie ally of +3 armor and then like recurring that with all sorts of interesting cards means that you can do some decent like armor plays and actually fiddle around with this card a bit. It gives the card a lot more space to breathe. You can actually use it, and whether or not that makes it better in ranked is a question, but it should be fun in draft, and you'll be glad that you picked it up. Okay, so Clutch Keeper is next. That card went down from 15 to 14, which 15 was already a ridiculous cost. Okay. I'm sure this change is fine. Like, Clutch Keeper is a card that is absolutely insane when you play it, so the more you can play it, the more happy you are. On the other hand, 15 is such a great number. So like there's some like Melvin part of me that's just a little bit sad. Yeah, no, I think that like being able to play Clutch Keeper more often will certainly make dinosaur decks happy. Dinosaurs are just not becoming a thing yet, so more dinosaurs is great. Let's see more Clutch Keepers out there. I'm totally for it, but aw, 15 is gone. Okay, anyways. Sometimes numbers change and Pojo is unhappy. Yeti Fur Player. So this one, oh man, I actually really like this one. Yeti Fur Player, and I gotta stop typing Yeti into the search bar. Yeti Fur Player is down from a 3/3 or up from a 3/3 to a 3/4. So I just played Mono Blue Primal Transform nonsense. I just did it. And I put 4 Yeti Fur Flingers in the deck because that's the only deck where you're going to play Yeti Fur Flinger, right? I'm sure there are some other ones. And I was really disappointed by it. And I eventually took it down to 2, and then I think I eventually took them out completely. But now Yeti Fur Flinger is a stat-efficient unit. And I love it when primal units are stat-efficient. They so often get the short end of the stick, and I feel like it's just like this holdover from Magic where like they... Well, time gets really well statted units already, so that's kind of a thing. But also, like, Primal, like, oftentimes feels like blue from Magic, and it is not. It is a big, like, scary creature type thing. There's a lot of Yetis in there, but there's also a lot of giants and a lot of dragons and a lot of other stuff going on, so it can have big statted units, but we just don't see that many of them. Anyways, so, like, when there are some, like, efficiently statted defensive units, that's, like, one thing that Primal probably just needs more stuff in, even though defensive units are actually something they're pretty good at. But a 3/4 is going to stick around on the board longer, and it's actually going to get to transform things into flying squirrels more often. That's all that's important about it. I think this card is actually playable in mono blue primal transform now, and if you find another deck for it, then it's probably more playable in that too. So yay, Mind Link decks should be delightful. He's a good draft card now. He wasn't necessarily a good draft card before. The Nightfall ability was fairly strong, and the transform ability was pretty strong, but the stat line was pretty weak, and being able to get torched is still a bad thing even in draft. Purflinger needed that extra stat, and I think that overall this will help him out a little bit. So yeah, should be good. Gear Master. This change I could sort of not care less about, but it's fine. Gear Master, whenever you play a Sentinel, is now a 3-cost card for a 1/1. So I've never liked Gear Master's design just because playing Sentinels is really, really hard. Like, you can't play multiple Sentinels in a row. And Gear Master's design was particularly egregious because this was a 4-cost 2/2 before. So you'd play a Gear Master instead of a Sandstorm Titan, and then every time you played a Titan, you'd get like a card and you get a +1/+1, but like Gear Master would just die to a torch or something. Now you play Gear Master on 3, you're much more likely to play Sandstorm Titan on 4 and draw that card, and then Gear Master can get like a little bit more out of control. This card still dies in ranked just all the time. However, it is a better draft card, I think, as a result of this change, and overall, like, I can actually see it being played now. That 1/1 stat line is maybe still too weak. Like, this probably could have stayed at 2/2. It probably couldn't have stayed at 2/2. If it was a 2/2 for 3 that played a Sentinel and drew a card, like, that would be, or drew a card every time you played a Sentinel, that card would probably just take over the game. So yeah, the potential is there for this card to take over the game. I don't love this card's design, so I mean, if it actually succeeds, I'm not sure if I'm happier about it. But maybe it'll give Praxis something cooler to do. They already have like a lot of big stuff there, and they don't usually care that much about card advantage, so we'll see if this does anything. Anyways, yeah, my opinions on Gear Master are pretty weak. Anyways, Talier's Intervention. This one's actually really cool. So this one changed in 2 places. First off, instead of 3 life, you gain 4 life. Instead of silencing an attacking enemy unit, you silence an enemy unit, which means that this card is just strictly better, I believe, than Silence. Silence is a fast spell, correct? Nope, it's a slow spell. Okay, so yeah, it's quite a bit better than Silence now. In any case, it's strictly better than Silence just to play, which means you're gonna want to maybe actually play it. Fast spell Silence at 1 is fairly strong. You can actually get some decent value out of this. I don't see any reason not to run this card in ranked now, especially if you're running actual Sentinels, because you can use this card to save a Sandstorm Titan, and that's a big deal. Like, a Sandstorm Titan not getting killed by a Vanquish is a big deal. A Heart of the Vault getting returned by a Talier's Intervention when an Obliterator is aimed at its face is a really big deal. Like, all of those things are really quite interesting. But now you have a lot more encouragement to use the modal side of the setup, because 4 life is a meaningful amount of life. It actually triggers life force effects fairly well. You can use it to save your own life against a lot of burn spells. 3 life was close-ish, but it wasn't going to get you there. And then it just wasn't very efficient for a 1-cost card. And silencing an enemy unit, that is probably the worst thing that you want to do, but it is also the thing that you often really want to do as a combat trick. So you can be like, oh yeah, someone's attacking me with this like giant boost creature, or like this creature that has like quick draw, and then you silence it and you get a card for a card trade out of Talier's Intervention. So lots of optional ways for Talier's Intervention to do card for card trading. Talier is like my favorite Scion, so I'm really glad that she has a sweet card now, and I'm very glad that this card is very playable. So yeah, you can play this card in ranked. You'll be super happy with it. This card is much better in draft now. Definitely play it. It's awesome. Scrap Pound. Oh, this one was really interesting. I did not think that Scrap Pound was a weak card before, but it is a stronger card now. Instead of giving +4/+4 if you have a Grenadin, it gets +5/+5 if you have a Grenadin. So Something that I was noting the last time that I played this card in draft is that this card, if the set 1 rotates out, this card fills the place of Pyro Knight, because it is a 1/1 creature that becomes a big creature later if you like fulfill some small amount of benefits. And since you're playing in particular the card Granite Waystone in a lot of fire decks, Scrap Hound can actually be like a fairly big dude, which is to say a 5/5 dude. Now it can be a 6/6 dude, which means it can fight with Sandstorm Titans, and that means that it might actually see play in Ranked, which I was not expecting from Scrap Hound. He's got kind of a derpy ability, and that derpy ability actually has a lot of strength to it now. I think this card is quite playable, and it's much better in draft now, but Grenadin were already good in draft, so that slight buff should maybe definitely make it more fun to pick Grenadin. So yeah, we'll see how much this card dominates in draft. I'm more looking forward to what it does in Ranked, and if it does anything in Ranked, I'm going to be happy with that change. Alright, Caleb's Intervention. Yeah, Caleb's Intervention was probably the one that most needed the buff. It now kills an enemy weapon or relic, which means that it is 1-cost relic removal. That's pretty important. One weird thing about this is that this still doesn't kill attachments, so it's still not strictly as good as Ruin, but nonetheless, it does destroy most everything that you want it to destroy, curses accepted. Nonetheless, yeah, like, killing a relic is actually very important. This means that you actually have a really good red answer to Auric Runehammer and to, like, a bunch of, like, the other, like, sort of interesting, like, relic weapons. This is one of those things that you can play against, like, the Taprod decks and actually have some success with. I think that overall, the flexibility of this card is good enough that you might actually want to play it in Ranked, and now that it can actually kill a relic, that's a huge change, because previously it was not getting its value most of the time. It was just getting the flexibility. Now it has the value and the flexibility, which means it's just a better charm. So we'll see if this changes this card for the better, and if not, maybe they can do something else to it. I don't know. I'm not sure if it's quite there yet. I think it's much, much stronger, and I think it's worth trying out. Okay, so that, I think, is all of the changes. We have Torgoth, Alu, Devastating, Setback, Black Sky, Withering Witch, Trailblazer, Pathfinder, Dawnwalker, Steward, Statuary, Emerald Spear. Yep, that looks like all of the cards that have changed. So what else is new? We've also added some puzzles. There's a couple new puzzles. We've been playing through them. They're ridiculously hard, which is great. The diamond ones in particular are quite nasty. So we see a bunch more in odds and ends. There's at least one more in quick draw. Oh, there's actually an entire section for quick draw. I guess quick draw didn't have a section before. There's one for the void, there's one for mentor, and then there's like a couple more odds and ends puzzles, specifically diamond odds and ends and master odds and ends. And it looks like I should probably be playing these ones because they've got like the master setup as well. But yeah, the ones that we've been playing in master have been pretty crazy hard. The diamond ones are fairly challenging, and we had some fun with those. I'm delighted to have new puzzles, and it's always cool to teach new lessons about Eternal and show more interactions. So I'm totally down with that. Okay, so yeah, like, I am really actually quite happy with all of the changes in this patch. I suppose that shouldn't be too much of a surprise. Like, in general, I've always been fairly fond of the changes that Direwolf has made, and there haven't been any that I've been, like, super not crazy about that, like, eventually just really changed the meta for the worse. There's been a couple cards that have changed, like, up and down before, but they've never made any, like, super serious mistakes while patching, and it doesn't look like they made any super serious mistakes right now. So while the Tavrod debate continues to rage, and that is something that I'm always, like, a little bit sad to see, I think that, like, overall, like, actually saying to anyone that Tavrod is not at the top of the list or the top of the tier is an important thing to do, but also, like, in general, just making sure that the patch is very healthy and not, like, and responding to, like, good stats and just, like, seeing the good choices that they're making with the card changes. I'm very interested in what's to come. There are some points of danger here, and I'm particularly worried about Steward of the Past creating more degeneracy. Like, basically that nerf means that there is the possibility that we will see a huge outflux or a huge influx of Haunting Scream type decks and decks that are just really obnoxious. So it's possible that that could affect the game state for the worse. And that's something that I am definitely trepidatious about and is my central concern with this patch. But overall, it looks like they're doing good house cleaning and they're making fairly good nerfs based on not only stats, but also like what people are complaining about to them in like the feedback and what kind of like setups they're specifically looking at. And I think they're looking at both of those things together, which is what you always want to do when you are developing a game. You don't want to react to just the Reddit outcry or just the stats on the cards. I think that like there's a mix of things here, and the cards that I've seen have all been complained about in some form or another, or like have been changed in some way that like actually seems to improve the game state and improve questions that people have had about the game for a while. So yeah, overall, very down with the patch, and pretty excited about Eternal to come. And we're going to be playing a lot more Dusk Road for the foreseeable future. So see you guys then, and thank you to the YouTube folks for watching. Cheers.